This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful presence and run your business. In this video, I want to start a conversation here about originality versus just copying. And I'll give you a little context here. So the other day, I was looking on YouTube for something and, all the recommendations come up and I get recommended a video that, look, it was pretty much a ripoff of a video that I did a few years ago. And while on one hand, I was flattered even by the direct copying of the title and the dangerously close thumbnail, I'm not going to say who it was or anything. It really wasn't a bad video necessarily. I did the original myself, but my point is that I looked through this individual's channel and I'm going through all the videos and there was a lot of copying that was going on of not just me, but other people too. And like I said, the videos aren't bad. The visual aesthetic wasn't terrible, but there was nothing really about it that would make me think that even though you might have some success with some of these videos, they're never going to be anything but second-rate versions of the one that came before them. This got me thinking about photography, and a few years ago, I was invited to be a judge in this online photography competition. There were other judges who were pretty big names that you probably would know, people who work with Adobe. I mean, we never met or anything, but I was really honored to be included in this echelon of esteemed names, and so I took it really seriously. And so what happens is it comes time to do the actual judging, and they send you a little login, password, and a link to go to. You do it all online. And I got on the computer, and I'm ready to go through, and there are literally thousands of images in here, and you're doing it by category. So there's like a fine art category, there's a landscape category, portraits, so on and so forth. So I'm going through the landscape category, and I'm realizing that most of these images look exactly like work that Michael Kenna does. In fact, I started wondering, did Michael Kenna enter this competition? If you're not familiar with Michael Kenna, he is an incredible photographer. He's one of my heroes. I absolutely love his work. He's a landscape photographer. He's got this style that he's developed over years and years of work that is absolutely gorgeous. It's very high contrast. It's very minimal. There's Gestalt principles at play. It's very zen. It's just an incredible look. But that's the thing, is it's such a stylized look, and a lot of people like that because it got popular. And so you see people that are entering a competition doing work that looks exactly like Michael Kenna. So the problem is that a lot of these photographers, clearly they're doing work that's good enough. They're going to get into shows or maybe even galleries. They can do books on their own. They probably do very well on Instagram. It's not that it's bad work, but the problem is that when you decide you're going to be a cover band like the Lounge Act down at the Holiday Inn on the weekends, that's all you'll ever be. You're never going to rise to the success of the original. It's just a copy. So think about it for a second. All of us as human beings, we're all born into this world, and this is how we learn to function. Whoever's raising us, our parents, they start to teach us language, and we start to learn words by emulating what our parents and people around us are doing. We start to grow up with a lot of these influences, particularly as our minds are developing. We learn by copying. That's all our point of reference is early in life, and that's what we end up doing. Now, what happens is we grow up and we mature out of that, and we start to define who we are. Usually after you're done with school, you start to get a sense of who you are, what it is in life that you're into, what you want to do with your life, who you want to be associated with, what your friends are. You start having some say in all those things, and that's when we start to develop as personalities. But I think we also bring that through life when we're learning new skills, whether that be music, whether that be photography. So we all learn by copying, and I actually argue that this is a very effective tool, especially when you're starting out in something. In fact, last summer, I did a photo assignment where several photo assignments that involved copying images, and I used Joseph Sudek as my example, and I did this exercise myself along with you guys, and I realized that it was very difficult, and I learned a lot doing it. Joseph Sudek is a lot about light, and there's the wonderful book of still lifes, and I picked several in there, and I thought, I'll just kind of gun these down and I'll show my experience. And I got stuck on the first one, which was the easiest one, is this picture of an egg, and getting that light to look exactly right. And then you start to realize there's these little tiny details in the composition that were intentional and make sense. It had to do with the way the grain was moving in the wood that was underneath, where the egg was positioned. And so there was a lot to be learned there, and I highly recommend this. This is an incredible way of effectively trying to learn something new. It's just like when we're born and we start to develop language and we learn how to talk, and we do that by copying. But there has to be a point, though, where you understand where copying ends and where your own ideas have to begin, because people who are adults that still copy like that, well, they're psychopaths. I had a music teacher once point out that great artists fall into one of two categories. You have people who are innovators, and you have people who are culminators. And I want to talk about that difference because I think both are equally great, but there is a difference. So let's take somebody like Leonardo da Vinci for a second. You know, the wild Italian guy with the long hair and crazy beard. Turns out he could paint really well. In fact, if you compare Da Vinci to many of his contemporaries of that time, even people who came much later, I mean, you have Da Vinci over here putting techniques into play that are very advanced. They're like nothing anyone's done before. He's got an incredible artistic skill, an incredible artistic sensibility, and when you look at him in the context, he's really the leader. He had students, he had contemporaries that would end up copying his work for studying purposes. He really was the leader. That is an example of an innovator. Then we have the other type of genius, which is the culminator. If you take somebody like the musical composer J.S. Bach, kind of a big dude, long hair, worked at a church, had a ton of kids, J.S. Bach is thought of as one of the greatest Baroque composers. In fact, he's a household name today. Interesting story, he was actually forgotten for many years. He was at the tail end of the Baroque period. Things started to change into classical. We had Mozart, who was the big hotshot at that point, and nobody really cared about J.S. Bach anymore until Mendelssohn rediscovered him years ago, and today he's a household name, and he's thought of as being really, when you think of Baroque music, that's the name. But not that it was necessarily original. It wasn't something that no one else was doing. He came at the end of a movement where you have all these other people that kind of paved the road. But what did Bach do? Well, he came in and he put his own voice into it. He put a new spin on it that had never been done, and he put this just element of genius over the top. And so while you could say that it's not completely unique, it's not completely original, it's original within context, but you have somebody who's a culminator. He's a culmination of ideas that come before him. Both these things are both genius, and you're lucky to get to either one of these levels if you're ever able to do that with your talent. So you may be thinking, Ted, what the hell do you know about this stuff? You are not a household name. You're just a chump making a video. Well, you're not exactly wrong, but this is something that I obsess over and I study nonstop. I have my heroes I look up to. I am infatuated with everything photography related, and it's something that I spend all of my time looking into. I have some techniques and some things that I'm trying to put into play in my own work, and that developing of your own voice and that obsession with trying to figure out who you are, I've got an interesting take on that, and I want to talk to you about it. But real quick, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor today, who are the awesome folks over at Squarespace.com. Squarespace is the easiest way to build a website, photo gallery, or online store without having to write a single line of code. Start with one of their gorgeous templates, use their drag and drop interface, build your brand online. But Squarespace is way more than just a way to build a website. Squarespace provides an amazing set of tools to create revenue and run a business. Squarespace now features dedicated member areas, allowing you to connect with your audience and generate revenue through members-only content. You can manage members, you can send them email communications, and you can leverage audience insights. Building an e-commerce site couldn't be any easier, and Squarespace now also supports collecting donations, so you can get support for a cause or charity by gathering contributions with PayPal, Apple Pay, Stripe, and Venmo, and build your audience using social sharing. The Squarespace blogging platform has a sharing button that you can customize that's going to allow sharing on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, StumbleUpon, Reddit, Pinterest, and Tumblr. So head over to Squarespace for a free trial. Once you feel that Squarespace is right for you, I can save you an additional 10% on your first order by using offer code AOP on checkout, or just use the link below this video. Once again, that offer code is AOP, and I want to give a special shout out and thanks to the awesome folks at Squarespace for sponsoring this video. So let me pose a double-ended question here. So is interesting work always original? Let's talk about that for a second. What do I mean by interesting work? Well, I'm talking about, let's say you go to an art gallery one night and you see an artist that you've never seen before, and there's something about the work that's just incredible. And you come home and the next day it's still stuck in your head and you're like thinking about the ideas that were presented, the images, the pictures, or maybe you find a book by somebody and maybe it's somebody you even know and you're looking through it and it's just really inspiring. So we're talking about that level of work. Is it generally original? I would say that it probably is, and that's why it's speaking volumes to you. Now, the other side of that question is original work always interesting? I would venture to say that probably not. So doing original work really just requires the mindset that that's what you're going after. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to produce something that it goes viral on Instagram or becomes iconic status. In fact, I think most photographers who've had success would agree that there's really not a formula that you can put together intentionally to make something that's just going to be that next viral image. It's a matter of spending your time and your career and your whole life preparing for that moment if it ever comes. And that's the thing, is sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but that's the price you pay pay when you're sacrificing just being a cover band to actually trying to do something original. It's an intention and it's a mindset. So my advice is have your heroes that you look up to, analyze their work, figure out what it is that's speaking to you through that work, even try to copy it for learning purposes at times. But then you have to hit a point where you also begin to start putting a lot of emphasis on analyzing your own work and looking at what you're doing and trying to bring that inner voice out. Try to decide what kind of makes you tick, what turns you on about a picture, what it is that you're doing, and start trying to do that more consistently. You know, somebody once told me, and I love this phrase, that cover bands don't change the world. And that is the truth. And so if you apply this, some of you may be lucky enough to actually become an innovator one day. You actually discover something that really largely is very unique and hasn't been done. Other people will be culminators, which isn't bad either. Being a culminator is an exciting thing as well, and I think it's just as big a deal. But you won't achieve either one of these if you don't try. I would love to know what you guys have to say, so drop me a comment below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.